Uh, the Sanskrit word, we've been working on vocabulary coming out of Buddhism the last few weeks, if you're just dropping in for the first time. Uh, and unnecessary suffering, the word for that is samsara. And it really means the whole architecture of unnecessary suffering. Um, there's a certain architecture to it, a lot of moving parts to why we have so much unnecessary suffering on this beautiful planet. In this, our country, the richest, wealthiest country in the world, unnecessary suffering. About 60% of the people living in poverty or low wealth conditions in our country. There's, and that's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. People can't get health care. That's unnecessary. And so the last song was an old blues song. It hurts me too. When somebody else suffers, when anybody else suffers, it hurts us all. And the blues came from, gee, one of the great unnecessary sufferings, the black slaves that were taken from Africa and all over the African continent to come and, you know, maybe make it across the Middle Passage across the Atlantic. About a third of them to half of them died on every voyage, and then the ones who made it end up working. You know how hot it's been. Imagine working out in the fields for 16 hours. That's what they did, and so they sang about their suffering. That became what started with field hollers. Just when you couldn't take no mo, you just hollered it out, and then that became, and then they would all sing, and then they felt better just to know that everybody was in solidarity. And the blues is really a way to turn a suffering into joy, to transform suffering. And so that's very much what the Buddha was doing. He might be one of the oldest bluesmen, Indian bluesman, because he was 2,500 years ago. He was trying to figure out, how do you transform suffering? Yeah. So uh, that's our sort of, we're looking into that. And when we try to understand this samsara, I just have one poem to work with today, and it's about that and more. So we'll get into some other vocabulary besides samsara. But let me pull up the poem, and then I'll just read it to you once. So just really listen to it, and then I'll go back and read it slowly and just comment a little bit on a few of the points. And then that should be our talk today. And if you want a copy of the poem, because there's it came up this week. I wrote it this week, but then there was another one that came up that will be in the Monday mail out. So if you want a copy of this particular poem, just send me notes or something. I'll send it to you. I don't really have notes. I just have the poem. So I'll send you the poem if you want it. Okay, where are you? The poem's title is "The Ultimate Renewable Energy," the ultimate renewable energy, and then the little subtitle under it is "Samsara is the Sanskrit word for unnecessary suffering." Uh, the Buddha talked about 5 necessary sufferings, and he said, as a human being, you got to come to grips with these. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with the universe. If you're here in a life, in a body and mind of form, you're going to encounter the pains of being born. We've sort of forgotten that, but a lot of the trauma happened, at that point. So the first necessary suffering is, we're born. If you weren't born, the whole thing is moot. So, but it's, I remember my nephew Jake. The labor and delivery was 36 hours, and he came out. He looked like one big bruise, and we all go through that first necessary pain. Then there's illness. This whole thing started in COVID. We'll at least all probably have one serious illness before we die, if not many, and then injury. Both physical for sure, But because the way we're wired, emotional, psychic, spiritual, uh, uh, so illness, injury, then aging. Most of us know the um, suffering involved with that, the aches and the pains, and then finally dying. So those are the five necessary sufferings if you have a body. That's sort of like the rent we pay to have a body in this universe. And so the suffering there means to bear the pain of each of these things. Jung said that the beginning of mental illness was the avoidance of the necessary pain of these five things. And it's great if you could take, some medicine. I had pain, pain pills when I had my surgery, things like that. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about just um, avoiding it, just really fighting against it rather than bearing it. Now, unnecessary suffering is mostly what humans appear to be good at. We add to it. And the Buddha's he taught for 40 years just to try to put people onto this idea that just don't create any more than we already have. And then, you know, um, last song was the old blues song. So it hurts me too. So sometimes I'm hurting and then I create suffering for other people. Or if I have a dear friend now who's really hurting and it hurts me too, just to know that he's hurting. So you don't have much of a spiritual practice if you're not working with how do we transform unnecessary suffering and how do we bear necessary suffering. That's the bottom line of any kind of spiritual or contemplative practice. So here's the poem, and I'll read it to you, and then we'll double back. But so just sort of listen with the ear of the heart, and just notice what resonates. Maybe it's an image, maybe it's a word, and then I'll double back through. The ultimate renewable energy. Samsara is the Sanskrit word for unnecessary suffering. Samsara is an old jalopy that runs on fear. Its steering wheel is made of karma, and its tires are made of ignorance. You can spend your whole life in a covered parking lot, traveling from level to level without ever finding the exit. So, pause, park the car, turn off the motor, pause, take your hands off the wheel, rest them on your thighs, shut your eyes, and watch your breath with the other eye, the eye of awareness, the eye of the heart. Do this pausing formally every morning before you do anything else, and do it informally throughout the day when you feel yourself caught up in the terrible rush hour the Buddha called samsara. Trade in that old jalopy for an EV that runs on pure awareness. You can be driven by fear or allow awareness to draw you towards grace. Okay, I'm going to read it through slowly and comment on it a little bit, just to tease a few things out. Samsara, unnecessary suffering. Samsara is an old jalopy that runs on fear. Well, that's the first thing to understand about unnecessary suffering. uh, this jalopy, old car with a lot of moving parts, which is what this is. It's not as simple as, you fall down and break your hip. No, unnecessary suffering is the Buddha has 12 links and conditions, and you really understand it. You have to really look at all of them, and then you have to at least take one link out. You know the old saying, a chain is as strong as its weakest length. And, it's how you break free from the Buddhist point of view from unnecessary suffering. But no, first of all, know what that car runs on. It runs on fear. And it's more accurate to say that it runs on this part of fear that we call anxiety. At its weakest, it just be a kind of mild anxiety, like refrigerator hum. That's always sort of there. And if you go all the way down the spectrum through mild anxiety, high anxiety, panic, uh, and then just absolute, freak out, fear. But it's a spectrum. But that's what it runs on. Uh, Human beings, uh, at some point, we know that we see, people be here and then they're not here. Imagine if you see your country here and not here, as in, places where there's warfare, uh, coups happen, uh, your loved ones here, then they're not here. How could you not have some anxiety about that until you actually look deeper? So it runs on fear. Its steering wheel is made of karma. Karma is something we've looked into. Karma is a kind of habit energy system. And this is born from early survival mode where we just got in the habit of protecting ourselves in a certain way. It's really what karma means. It's not punishment. Karma will come back on you. Well, it'll come back on you because how we protected ourselves as kids, when we keep going with that, it messes up our life because it's like trying to make love in a suit of armor. It just doesn't work, you know. So its steering wheel is made of karma. Our habit energy is really driving the car, runs on fear, and its tires are made of ignorance. Ignorance is one of the fundamental poisons. There's three from the Buddhist point of view, and ignorance is where the rubber meets the road. It's like the foundation. The road is, the road is ground zero, and then ignorance is the first thing. And ignorance doesn't mean low IQ. Ignorance means the unwillingness to see. We look away. Anybody who's had a long-term relationship, or really any relationship at all, knows what it's like to be unwilling to see issues. Most marriages, you take certain issues off the table, you put them under the table, under the rug, because they're conflictual. It seems to solve the problem. Ignorance is just deciding you don't want to see what's going on. That's why in a poem I call a prayer of consent, the first part of the first prayer is, may what needs to be seen be seen. Uh, we're in a way assenting to a kind of blindness, and it will catch up to you. So samsara is an old jalopy that runs on fear. Its steering wheel is made of karma, bad, old habits. You don't even know their habits. They run on automatic habits. And tires are made of ignorance. You can spin. Now, here's the image that I had of a covered parking lot at the beginning. One of those ones you go up how many levels, and it's sometimes, and that is what samsara is. It's levels. And if you can think of, sort of like, well, just go flush the toilet and watch the water goes down the drain in a kind of circular fashion. You felt that circular energy in your mind, okay? You could spend your whole life driving around in circles in a covered parking lot from level to level without ever finding the exit. How do I get out of here? We have dreams like that. I do. Those dreams are trying to tell you something. You can't get where you want to go. Yeah, samsara has a gravity to it that holds you in sort of, at least minor unnecessary suffering. But it can become major. The friend I'm praying for now, dedicating this to, is in some major unnecessary suffering right now in a relationship. So what do? There's really a poem in two stanzas. So, so you can, in a covered parking lot from level to level without ever finding the exit. So pause, park the car, you know, at some point you realize you got to stop digging. That's another way of saying it. One more shovel. You just got to stop. If you're in a hole, you stop digging. And when you're get caught in unnecessary suffering, pause, stop, park the car, turn off the motor. Pause. Pause is a great word. Um, and so in a few minutes when the talk ends and we segue into sitting meditation, that's a formal pause. We're pausing all the doing. We even pause the words, and then we're in silence and in stillness. And so that's a formal pause. So that if you really want to have a definition of meditation, it's just something you do on a regular basis. For me, I'm sitting right where I'm sitting now. I sit here in the morning and I sit here in the afternoon. Last night I sat here at night because I couldn't get to sleep uh, because of it hurts me too when a friend is suffering, you see. And this is what I know to do. I come over here and sit here, light the candles here, and just sit with it. You know. So that formal pause we call meditation, and you've heard this word, but pausing on the fly throughout the day, just to refocus, to take a breath. That's what they call mindfulness, Buddhist. Uh, you just you just pause, and if when you start living a contemplative life, there are these little islands of a pause throughout the day. I call them islands of contemplation that go through the day. And you only take 30 seconds or a minute. It makes a world of difference. Uh, it's a pause. I give the formal position. Take your hands off the wheel, rest them on your thighs, up or down. Shut your eyes. Watch your breath with the other eye. Shut your two eyes and watch your breath with the other eye, the eye of awareness. No, awareness is a key word. We have it all the time, but it's like you can't notice it because it's what notices. That's why you can't notice awareness. But the awareness is what notices. It's when we sit in meditation, when you notice your mind is, my mind was going like this last night with stories, in pain myself because my friend was in pain, and then in stories that were going around like this. We all know what that's like. And so the essence of formal pausing, you try to leave that circle. You let go of that. You return your body to the breath. You relax the whole body, and then you rest in awareness, just pure awareness. See? And when that's really strong, like it was last night, I barely, it just might have been a half second, and then I'm back out into it. But gradually, as I sat, the gravity shifted, and I could just rest in pure awareness for a while, and everything calmed down. We're taking the energy out of that spinning wheel of thought. It's like it's like a wheel in the mud. It doesn't take you anywhere. If you're angry, you can get more angry if you're in that. If you're feeling hurt, you can increase the hurt if you stay in that circle. You see, the circle is the image of samsara, and it has gravity. I mean, it has force, and so we're trying to break that by just moving away from it. You let it go, return, relax, and rest in something deeper. We all have that place that's somewhere that's deeper, a place of refuge. We're not taught about it, but I'm teaching you about it now. That would be the soul, that would be your true self, that would be the center. You, you can give it different words at different traditions, the Buddha nature, but there is a place beneath the tsunamis of emotion, you see. Uh, and do it in the morning before you do anything else. Then you go from thinking about this practice, reading about this practice, and even flirting with this practice every now and then to actually starting to make it part of your life. When you get up, you spend some time resting in natural great peace, resting in kindness, resting in beauty and goodness and truth. It's all inside. That's the big hidden secret. And at first you have to sort of take it on faith. Not believe so much, but just say, well, other people have found this. Yeah. That's really like a Copernican revolution. Copernicus figured out that the Earth was circling the sun, not the other way around, even though it appears to be obvious that the sun comes up in the east, but it really doesn't. It's the turning of the Earth. So he didn't really make something different. He just saw it different, you see. And so when you finally, he had a hunch that that was true, and then he did the math, and then he said, but people still didn't believe him. There's still a flat Earth society, you see. And so this is the equivalent of a Copernican revolution when you realize, oh, there's something precious inside. There's a jewel inside that can transform unnecessary suffering and can help you bear necessary suffering. Yeah, that's a revolution. Okay, and you can start to be sensitive, and when you're going through your day, when you start to feel yourself rushing, hurrying. I say when you feel yourself caught up in the terrible rush hour, the Buddha called samsara. You're starting to nip into samsara when you're rushing through life, when you feel hurried. I mean, what is the hurry? It's momentum from thinking. All of a sudden you're hurrying. Yeah, that's when you notice you're hurrying, when you notice you're rushing through this life, stop, park that car. It's like putting a stick in this spinning wheel of unnecessary suffering. So just pause, take 3 breaths, refocus, realize how insane it is to rush towards dying. Okay. So the final 2 lines say, trade in that old jalopy, unnecessary suffering, for an EV, for an electric vehicle that runs on pure awareness. You could say for an eternal vehicle, EV, because pure awareness doesn't come and go. It's always here, always will be here. This is what goes on when this body and mind, you know, reaches its 4,000th week, or maybe it's 5,000 weeks, if you get to be around 100, but, who knows? But the eternal vehicle is pure awareness. It's what's at that very center. It's that glowing orb that's in the icon we use for meditation. And now this last line has 2 key words in it. You can be driven by fear or allow awareness to draw you towards grace. Driven, and you want to live a life that's driven by fear, or do you want to live a life that's where you feel drawn? That is a really interesting thing to just keep in awareness. Uh, More and more, I just do what I'm drawn to do. I was a very driven person at one time, less driven, but I could still be there at any given moment. But I know the feel of being driven, and I know the feeling of being drawn. And if you can more and more allow awareness to draw you towards grace, grace is also another word for that center, and also another word for what is constantly coming from the outside trying to get into us. Grace transforms things, it transforms suffering. I was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, you see. So the driven and drawn are something that can change your whole life when you start paying attention, noticing. Awareness notices everything. It notices your thinking because thinking is within awareness. You can become aware of it. Thank God, because then you can drop it. See, interesting. Okay, I think that's enough for now. If you really want a copy of that poem, just you'll just send me notes and I'll send you a copy of it. But there'll be a new poem, another poem that'll be in Mondays. Normally I do the poem that I use if I use one, but there's another one for you tomorrow. This is the ultimate renewable energy, and that's awareness, not fear. It's awareness. And so now we're just dropping into that field. Okay, so I think that's good enough, Jill.